Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to Normal Day in Russia. Right now I'm headed to the Kubinka Tank Museum in the Moscow region, which houses some of the most unique and unbelievable pieces of military equipment. And you're coming along with me. Let's go. Alright guys, so I've just made it to the Kubinka Tank Museum and I'm gonna head out and take a look at some of my favorite exhibits and show you guys along the way. I'm not gonna show you everything because there are literally hundreds of tanks and very unique machines that you could find here, but I'm gonna show you 3 or 4 pieces of military equipment that just blew my mind the first time I saw them that you should definitely check out if you ever have the chance to visit this museum in the Moscow region. The Kubinka Tank Museum and the Patriot Park Museum next door really are, I think one of the most unique military museums in the world, in the sense that they have some machines that you will just not find anywhere else, that exist solely in one exemplar, including a lot of tanks from World War II that were trophies of war. So definitely worth checking out. Come along with me as I show you these really fantastic machines. This right here is the biggest super tank ever produced in the history of the world. It's called the Panzerkampfwagen Maus, which is very strange, I know, naming the biggest tank ever after one of the smallest mammals in existence. But nonetheless, this incredible machine comes in at an incredible 188 tons of weight, if you can imagine that. It is extremely heavily armored. It has armor ranging all the way up to 24 centimeters, especially in the front regions of the tank. But it's more than just an armored tank. This is actually a fortified military outpost or command post in and of itself. Originally designed in the early 1940s and brought to life in 1944, this is the only existing exemplar of this machine, this extreme behemoth of a tank in the world. The idea behind designing this extreme machine was to create a sort of mobile bunker. Its main purpose was to transfer high-ranking military officers and personnel between outposts on the front lines, as well as actually to command troops from within the tank. So it had mounted radio systems to constantly stay in contact with the fortified outposts on the front lines. It was also capable of causing quite a bit of damage using the mounted weapon system. So what you see above me is a rifle-bore 128mm main gun coupled with a secondary 75mm cannon right next to it. So a very impressive, very amazing machine. Just standing next to it, to be honest, I'm awestruck at the pure size of it, the dimensions of it. Now, these things weren't just produced, they were actually field tested as well at the Kammersdorf weapons testing facility in Germany. But at that point in 1944, the Soviet army had been advancing quite a bit, liberating Eastern European nations, and they were approaching the Kammersdorf weapons testing facility. So a decision was made among the German high-ranking officers to destroy the 2 units that had been built, the Maus V1 and the Maus V2. And when the Soviet army did happen upon the remains of these 2 tanks, they decided to put together what was left of the 2 of them and created this single, very, very unique machine. Standing next to this thing, it really is hard to believe that this is actually a tank and not just a bunker. This looks like something that's supposed to be dug into the ground and completely immovable. But then you take a look at these incredibly huge tracks that are about a meter wide, and you realize, yeah, this is actually a moving machine. And they're capable of taking this tank incredibly over very large distances. The V1 had an aviation-grade turbine engine, whereas the V2 had a diesel engine, and optimally, if the tank didn't get stuck anywhere en route to its destination, it could cover anywhere up to 186 kilometers. So that is a very impressive range for something, again, that weighs 188 tons. I can only imagine what it must have felt like in the 1940s to look at this tank while it was going through its testing phases. It really must have felt for the German designers of this tank like this was a marvel of engineering, and it remains a marvel in my opinion to this day. A very incredible, very capable machine, although since the 1940s, since World War II, the tactics of war have really changed, and something as large as this, something as heavy as this, is more of a very handy and very useful target in the field of war. Now there are quite a few entirely unique pieces of equipment over here. Right behind me is the German 041 self-propelled mortar system. Now these were used throughout World War II, starting from 1940 up until 1944. And again, this is an extreme machine. It weighs around 124 tons and is capable of firing a 60 centimeter, 2,000 kilogram projectile to a distance of over 10 kilometers. So this is some insane firepower. And again, they were used to bombard the citadel, the Brest citadel in Belarus, for example, at the very start of the war. 6 of these units were actually built and manufactured and used, and also 1 production prototype. Again, with an incredible 124-ton weight, incredibly large parameters all around. Just look at the size of this. I think the only thing that could make this self-propelled mortar system look small by comparison is the Maus tank that you guys just took a look at. Now, if this doesn't look like something right out of a sci-fi movie or novel, then I really don't know what does. This is an actual tank that was designed in 1942, and it's called the Alkett NK-101 mine clearing tank. Now, this system was designed, built, and tested in 1942, and its premise and its main purpose, as you can tell again by the name, was to clear minefields. It was supposed to go through the minefield ahead of infantry and clear the pathway to make sure that it was safe to use. And in order to clear those mines, it used these enormous side-mounted tracks that it has that span almost the entirety of the height of the tank itself. And in order to protect the crew on board the tank from the blast wave of those explosions, it's lifted quite a bit up above the ground. Now, while this tank isn't very heavy, it's only about 40 tons. It's actually even a little bit less than 40 tons in weight. It does nonetheless have quite a bit of pressure on the two front-mounted tracks that it has. So one of the things that made this not pass the combat tests was the fact that it would just press down into the ground too much and get stuck. It does actually have a third wheel, and I'll show you that from the side. It doesn't have any sort of suspension to speak of at all. As you can see, the tracks are hard mounted to the frame of the tank itself. But again, it just looks incredibly weird, incredibly quirky and strange. This isn't a very typical design. Definitely not something that you would see on today's battlefields. What I have behind me at this point is the Mark V Ricardo heavy tank from the United Kingdom. Now, this was one of the main tanks and one of the most powerful tanks from World War I, and this is actually the first exhibit that was brought to the Kubinka Tank Museum in 1938. As far as their technical parameters, this particular tank weighs around 28.5 tons and is capable of moving at a speed of 7.5 kilometers to a distance of 72 kilometers. So it's not very fast. It isn't very maneuverable either, and these kind of had a habit of getting stuck and turned over in trenches. But nonetheless, again, this was a very powerful and very effective means of psychological warfare, of scaring the enemy into retreating when you advance upon them in a machine as awesome and horrifying as this, again, for World War I, when the enemy hadn't really seen tanks on the battlefield before, let alone have to fight against them using conventional arms. 400 of these units were produced. This was the main battle tank of the British Tank Corps during World War I. Really, the main reason why I wanted to bring you guys here today was to take a look at the Maus tank, which is just an incredible piece of machinery. But in total, this museum, the Kubinka Tank Museum and the Patriot Park Museum next door, have hundreds of exhibits that are worth your time. So if you're ever in the Moscow region, you definitely have to set aside at least half a day to take a look at some of the incredible machines that they have, because keep in mind, a lot of these tanks are one of a kind and don't exist anywhere else in the world, again, including the Maus super tank that we saw earlier in the video. And again, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to be seeing you very soon on another normal day in Russia.